morning again, everybody, and welcome back. We have another celebrity guest today. This is Te Maia Wiki, and Te Maia is a youth who's here at COP26. She hails from Northern California, and she is representing the Yurok Tribe and the Māori People. And we're really grateful to have her here today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this was a really important interview for me to find, and despite there being thousands of people here, representation by Indigenous peoples at this event has actually been a little hard to find. And so I feel really grateful that you have made time for us today to share your unique perspective. And I wanted to just begin by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience here at COP26 and what this has all meant to you so far?
Yeah, so this is my first COP. I'm only 16, coming into it, I didn't know what to expect, especially with the pandemic. It adds another layer of like weird travel restrictions, and security is different. And a lot of people that I've talked to have explained that this COP is not like other COPs that they've been to. And I'm also, right, like being 16, being Indigenous, like I am so grateful to be here that any awkward or weird or uncomfortable experience doesn't matter, because my appreciation like counters it. It's really hard because even like with that appreciation and gratitude being here, there have been so many struggles to fight for Indigenous people in this space, and I've just found that it's really inaccessible for people. I'm with a lot of Indigenous people from the global south, specifically Ecuador, and I see all of these elders who are cold, who Spanish or Portuguese is their second language, and then their Indigenous language is their first language, and then there's like no translators, and there's such a language barrier that it's hard for them to come in. It's hard for them to navigate this space, and this is not like a space that they're used to or a format that they're used to. And so coming in here with a badge, because I also know like hundreds of people who have come here and don't have badges, and I've been organizing outside, doing events, panels, and marches. I really am so privileged to be here that I want to at least use that privilege to the fullest, so that I'm not only representing my own tribes, Yurok and the Māori people from New Zealand, but also like all of the Indigenous voices and issues that need to be brought into this space that aren't. And also just there's a lot of academic language that's being used in this space that's also very unfamiliar for a lot of people. I don't think people understand the extent or the significance of what 1.5 degrees means. I heard a really great analogy where there's like your body has a certain temperature that it needs to be, and if it goes 1 degree Celsius above it, you're fully in a temperature. And right now, the world has a fever, if we're putting it into perspective. But even like the way that things are being greenwashed, people throw out nature-based solutions, which sounds great, but it's like, okay, what does that mean? Who does that affect? What actually is like environmental finance? Like actually, what does that mean? Same with loss and damage. And so when I'm in this space and I'm hearing these things and I'm listening to these politicians speak about these things, it's like my parents at home don't know what that means. My community doesn't know what that means. The 16-year-old friends that I have don't know what that means. And I want to be able to come back and translate, okay, this is what really happened, and filter out all of the missing pieces for them. And also there's a lack of, and I understand there's a lot of security because there's so many people here, there's so many important people here with different messages, and it's hard to accommodate to each of those different identities. But I think there's a way in which security or people working here interact with Indigenous people, especially when it's very visible, like when I wear my jewelry, when people have their regalia, or when they have tattoos. People don't know how to interact with us. Random people will start taking photos, or we burn sage in like little abalone shells, and it's something that you can do inside perfectly fine. And we went the whole day doing that throughout the space. And then randomly at the middle of the day, like a firefighter came up to us and said that we had like started a fire, and it became this whole thing where all of these firefighters and security was surrounding us. And in that included like Black and Indigenous people, people who have a language barrier. And that's such a scary moment for them because it's like, I understand that it raised a concern, but the way in which you communicate that to us should not be with force and should not be coming from a place of like, you're doing something wrong. And I think instead we need to listen to each other and understand that not everybody is used to navigating such a formal space. Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that about your experience, and I'm really sorry that that was your experience.
Yeah.
And obviously the world needs to do a lot better. It has not done well by Indigenous and Native people for most of the world's history. So it's really wonderful, and I really respect the fact that you treat your responsibility here as a privilege. I do too. You know, you have already spoken about all these, you've given so many people listening right now lessons about how they think or their behavior is incompatible with dialogue and openness to other people. What are some lessons you would say you've learned, or things that you've gathered here that you want to take back and share with others? You talked a little bit about translating, right? But what can you go out in a little more, like what you're interested in bringing back?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I'll be sitting in these panels, or I'll be sitting in these events, or I'll be listening to these speeches, and because I'm used to, like if I brought up Article 6 in this space, I doubt there's anybody who wouldn't know what I was talking about. If I brought up Article 6 in any community that I'm familiar with at home, whether that be in my tribe, whether that be in my household, whether that be with my high school friends, nobody would understand what that means, which is, by the way, an article in the Paris Agreement, and it's one of those, I'd say, controversial aspects. And so I think understanding the way in which, I guess, the media presents the information, because, right, like, there are lines being edited in the agreement, and there are politicians negotiating, and it really, honestly, feels like profit and economy is prioritized over real change, and thinking about the people, and it's not being shared in that way for obvious reasons. And so when I go back home to my reservation and we're being directly impacted by these issues, there's one of the largest dam removal projects in the U.S. is taking place on my river, the Klamath River. Our traditional food is salmon. There's not salmon in our rivers. The California wildfires is, creating smoke. Like, we are directly being impacted by these issues, and so the solutions benefit us the most. And I think also, as an Indigenous person, just putting it out there, like, I understand this climate change is a direct result of colonialism, and actually healing and restoring the balance and the health of this planet and our land is really a decolonizing issue. It's hard for people to understand that concept. And so bringing it into this space, that mindset and that sort of intention that I have, is something that people aren't used to and something that needs to be heard. So again, things that I'm taking back to my community is, I think, putting in our values, and taking back is understanding like the solutions that are being talked about here, how that affects us. And also just like the way of organizing. Like, I have made so many beautiful connections with people from all over the world. And Indigenous people is such a broad term, and I feel like it gets thrown out a lot. But really, it's just the people of the land, the stewards of the land. And I've met so many people from all over the world. And it really just goes to show, like, Indigenous sovereignty is going to heal us. How do you even talk about or have a conversation about healing the land without consulting the stewards of the land first? So yeah, just taking away those values, and also like a way in which we organize, because I feel like it's such a grassroots organizing is really big on my reservation and in the communities that I'm involved with, and to have that on a global level is really important.
I really I just really want to lift up the authenticity and the truth behind what you're saying, and it is an uncomfortable truth for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are not afraid to talk openly about that is a real testament to your maturity and the reason why people gave you the opportunity to be inside this space. And I'm grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
So you really kind of, despite all these challenges, the fact that you're still sharing and putting out your message and taking an understanding back of how people respond to that and integrate that. Going from there, what would you like to see change about either COP itself or this global discussion and this movement to addressing climate change? What would you like to see change?
I want to change the way that people talk or approach climate change. It's from such a, I feel, the way that people approach it is really interesting because it's almost like a new thing. Like, oh, like the climate's getting hotter. Like it seems like we should do something about it. And also like the root of what people see as the problem is more of like companies need to do better. Like we need to like limit some things. Like we can continue doing these practices that are harmful to the earth, but we just need to minimize that. When really it's like, this is such a deeper issue. When you go back to the roots, like I said before, this is colonialism. There would still be salmon running in my rivers if people hadn't put dams there, which aren't beneficial to pretty much anybody. It's interesting that people think of it as such a light issue or something that only scientists can do or be involved with. And I think just understanding like it comes from the people and not necessarily that normal humans can make the everyday change, because like if I go vegan, how impactful is that? But I think together the people's power can motivate that change and make actions. We've already had huge accomplishments while we're here and we're present. When I'm walking into this COP space, I see the red dresses representing MMIW, or Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People. And it's like, Indigenous people are here. And also, it faded, but there was an eyeball drawn on my hand. Because youth had an action against fossil fuels, and it's just like, even though you can't see us, we're still present, and I want you to feel that when you're in those meetings and having those conversations about I think for them it feels like an economic negotiation, and it's like, no, this is something that's directly going to harm the people, and I want you to think about that, and I want you to feel that when you're in those meetings. So I think just the way in which we approach that and think about that, we need to bring Indigenous youth to the conversation. We need to bring traditional practices because we understand how to take care of the planet. And if you listen to all of us, then we know how to take care of all the land everywhere. Yeah.
Well, your answer is going to be a great segue into my last question for you. So one, I personally believe youth are our best hope, and I also think that what you said about organizing and talking and sharing your experiences and your information, wanting to change the way that politicians have this discussion, right, and who's included. So that's what I want too, and I think that there are other people who do want it, but I don't think all the politicians and regulatory agencies and government bodies that have some of these authority, decision-making powers know how to do it, right? And I always cringe when we discuss stuff at our air board about, maybe we should add a seat for a youth. I used to be that youth who would get added to a seat for social services programs based on my lived experience, and I often felt tokenized, and I felt I had no other person on the board who understood me, and I'd be asked to speak on behalf of an entire demographic that wasn't represented in me. And so I'm just curious if you have ideas or thoughts about how to both elevate and include in local and regional decision making the role and voice of both youth and Indigenous persons.
Yeah, it's such a complicated issue because it's so dimensional. There's so many layers to it, and it's so hard because um, so many people have a different way of of thinking, of believing, but also like the best way to interact or the best way to overcome an issue. Like everybody has a different idea of what that means to them, and so like having this conversation is like there's no one right answer. Honestly, it's I just think the best thing to do is recognize that like we don't want a seat at the table. We want to burn the table. Like we are the table, because in 20 years you're not going to be thinking about what 40-year-old politicians, like I'm not going to care what they're going to think. The other 16-year-olds that I've met here, the 20-year-olds that I've met here, I'm caring about what they think because they are going to be the people who are taking action. And so having a little tokenizing panel where you have one youth talk and then talk for 10 minutes and then you never listen to them again is like that's not effective. And so I think it's actually investing in our youth, and I don't just mean money, but I mean like time and energy and listening. And same with Indigenous people. Let's listen to our stories. We all have creation stories. We have stories about our relationships with the land and understanding what that connection means and how deep that relationship goes. And it's like storytelling is so important to understand, okay, this is how humans in this place interacted with the land, and how can we incorporate that or consider that when we're having conversations about how to help the climate. And I also think just being an active listener, as hard as that is, because there's a lot of things that you don't want to hear and there's a lot of things that will make you uncomfortable. But I think the best way is just to start listening and sit with that uncomfort and think about, okay, why do I have this reaction? How can I undo that? How can I learn from that? And how can I move forward in a way in which I can become more comfortable approaching the subject? So again, just investing in us, time, energy, and money, and also like finding, like a lot of Indigenous people here, I've noticed, don't have the resources to be in this space. And so if there's a way that we can get people to the conversation, because it's not that they don't want to, it's not even that they're not here, they're here, but they're outside the gates in the freezing cold because they don't have a badge to come in. So making room and understanding that we need to expand not only our knowledge, but our capacity in which, like, we don't, like if you're having a panel, don't have one youth, have 3/4 of the panel be youth, you know? So yeah, I think it's hard, but just listening is the best thing you can do.
I love how you gave me a great idea for placemaking, and that's something I'm going to take back with me,
Yeah.
among many other things I've learned from you today. And I think anybody who's taken the time to listen to Te Maia and hear her thoughts and her experience here, you're a better person for having spent that time listening to her. So I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you don't even have a license yet, but you are.
Yeah.
We talked about that before we started.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's the thing. You may not have a license, but you have a lot of other things in spades. And so I just wish you the best. I thank you for blessing my life with your time today, and best of luck to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.